Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading this morning from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, chapter number 69. Narada Muni visits Krishna's palaces. Like this. This is one of Krishna's palaces. So Narada Muni also wanted to visit his palaces. You're all very fortunate. You get to come every day if you choose to see his beautiful palace. So Narada Muni had to make a special effort. So in some ways you're more fortunate than Narada Muni, because you come every day, or you can, to see Krishna in his beautiful palace. Narada apparently has to make a special effort. You all didn't have to do that. So, Kava api sanjam upasinam japantam brahma vakyatam ekatra cha asi charmabhyam charantam asi vartmasu kvapi sanjam upasinam japantam brahmavagyatam ekatra chasi charmabhyam charantam asivartmasu kvapi sanjam upasinam japantam brahmavigyatam ekatra chasi karmabhyam charantam asivartmasu kvapi sanjam upasinam japanam brahmavagyatam ekatra chasi karmabhyam charantam asivartmasu. Bolo. Vaishnavis? Some other ladies? One more? Certainly more than two. The ladies can chant some Sanskrit, huh? Oh. We should be shy, but not for service, or else someone takes our place. So, word for word translations. Kva'api, somewhere. Sadyam, the rituals of sunset. Upasinam, worshipping. Japantam, quietly chanting. Brahma, the Vedic mantra. Gayatri. Vakyatam, controlling his speech. Ekatra, in one place. Cha, and. Asi, with sword. Karmabhyam, and shield. Charantam, moving about. Asivartmasu, in the corridors set aside for sword practice. They have a place like that for the brahmacharis? The sword practice? No? Okay. It's bona fide. You might ask for it. It's mentioned in the Shastra, huh? Translation. Somewhere Lord Krishna was observing the rituals for worship at sunset by refraining from speech and quietly chanting the Gayatri mantra. And elsewhere he was moving about with sword and shield in the areas set aside for sword practice. Please repeat. Somewhere Lord Krishna was observing the rituals for worship at sunset by refraining from speech and quietly chanting the Gayatri mantra. And elsewhere he was moving about with sword and shield in the areas set aside for sword practice. So at least we should be careful. If you are practicing your sword, at least do it in a place that is set aside for it. Not in the main entranceway or something, yeah? It be a special place. Purport, very short purport. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, the words Sanjam Upasinam indicate sunset rituals, whereas the words Asi Charmabhyam Charantam refer to sword practice, which takes place at dawn. Om Gyanatmyandasya Jananjanan Shalakaya Chakshur Omnitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapanantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivedanta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So first I'll just mention, my name is Anuttam. I'm visiting from Washington, D.C. on my way to the Govardhan Eco Village, for some coursework there. My main service is ISKCON Communications Director. Any of you that aren't familiar with ISKCON Communications, you may or may not be aware of, there's a news site, it's been there for many years, ISKCON News. Just some people don't know, you can find very easily information about our society all around the world. It's easy to remember, news.iskcon.org. Okay, news.iskcon.org. So that's the website that we oversee, the source of information, and we do a lot of work trying to build relationships with different communities of people, religious leaders and government leaders and educators and academics and the media and things like that. Because as we know, Prabhupada was very interested in bringing ISKCON into the center of society He built some retreats, but most of his temples were in the cities, like here in Mumbai. So he very much wanted us to be a part of life. He wanted us to have to be a spiritual influence, a guiding influence on society. And you can't do that by being isolated. So if we isolate ourselves, it's hard for people to get any kind of practical insight of what we do, or how they might be benefited from the Vaishnava philosophy and practices. So ISKCON Communications is focused on trying to build those kind of relationships. So if you want to learn more, look at news.iskcon.org. I think we regularly run stories about Chowpatty Temple. I know we do on the food distribution from here, etc. So you can take a look at that. So this is a very short verse and short purport, but it's part of a whole series of verses that are describing Narada Muni's visit to the palaces of Krishna at Dwarka. It's described in some of the earlier verses that he was very eager. The word is used. He was eager to see the Lord, and particularly how he thought was thinking it's amazing that the one Supreme Lord has thousands of palaces for each of his 16,000 plus queens, and he wanted to see. Which in one sense it's interesting because he was a brahmachari, so why is he interested in the palaces of the queens? But because it's transcendental, because it's Krishna Leela, then he's very much interested in finding out and coming and seeing. So as he enters, few are described here, some of the different palaces, and it's explained that in each one he saw Krishna was doing different things. So here in today's verse, it says he's observing the rituals for worshipping at sunset, chanting the Gayatri elsewhere. So he went to another palace. He was moving about with sword and shield, practicing, as the Kshatriya's duty is there to protect the citizens. And different activities are being described in the different verses. So just some reflections on this, because many times, it may be a little bit different in India, but I don't know so much different. A lot of places in the world and a lot of people, if you said, yes, we studied in the books this morning, we studied in the scripture what God is doing. Most people say, that's very nice that you think like that, and I hope you're inspired to think like that. It's quite cute that you think like that. There's so many simple people that think like that, but ultimately we know either there is no God, there's only science explains everything. Some people think like that. Or many people say, yes, there's so many leelas, and ultimately you become the leela. Ultimately there is no leela, there's only one. But you think about the leela. It's good for you. You bhakti-yoga people, it's good for you. Simple. Keep it simple, like that. And many people just think this is some nice mythology. That's a popular word these days, mythology. The Greeks had their gods, the Romans had their gods, Hare Krishnas have their gods. So yeah, so you say God had many, many palaces. Oh, that's very nice. You just keep chanting and be peaceful. Don't disturb anybody. Believe what you like. But it's not like that, actually. It's not like that. It's not a simple thing, actually. We're studying, which canto is this? Is this the first canto? This is the 10th canto. You have to read a lot of verses before you get to this point. And is this the Bhagavad Gita we're reading? The essential, basic, philosophical text that's there for everyone? Are we reading Bhagavad Gita? No, this is a graduate study to the Bhagavad Gita. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, many, many verses like this, but here's just a few. Tribir gunamayar bhavar abhi sarvam idam jagat mohitam nabijananti mam ebhya param avyayam. Deluded by the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, the whole world does not know me, whom above the modes and inexhaustible. Later in the same chapter, 7th chapter. I'll just read the English. Lord says, unintelligent men who do not know me perfectly think that I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, was impersonal before and have now assumed this personality. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is imperishable and supreme. That's 724, 725. I am never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. For them I am covered by my internal potency, and therefore they do not know that I am unborn and infallible. So sometimes when people hear these descriptions given in the Shastra, particularly the Vaishnava Shastras, about the personality of Godhead, they think, again, it's a myth, or it's a nice meditation, or it's some kind of simplistic understanding. But we understand from the Gita that actually it's the opposite. That understanding the personal nature of God is the highest revelation. And for most people in the world, they can't understand God's personality, or they're not even given the chance to, because it's a very sophisticated subject matter and it requires some degree of purification to actually begin to enter into these pastimes. Just like we can see Narada Muni, because he was such a great sage, he went from palace to palace to palace unobstructed. Others, we can imagine so many guards were there. Not everybody just walked into the palace and there's Krishna being fanned by Rukmini and different queens. It wasn't like that. He had special access. So in a similar way, we understand as Vaishnavas there's so many great religious traditions in the world, and we have respect for all of them. In the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that whenever there's a decline in religious practice, at that time I come myself. And in the purport, our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada, he explains it's not that God only comes, he uses these specific words, it's not that God only comes on Indian soil. He says he can come at any time and any time whenever he desires to reestablish the principles of religion. And Prabhupada explains that those same principles, they're taught according to time and place, according to the capacity of people to understand. And he gives a very simple example. He says just like in mathematics, 2 plus 2 equals 4, it's there in basic math and it's there in very advanced mathematics. The same principles are still true. But according to one's understanding, there may be deeper knowledge, but the essential truths are there. That the soul is different from the body, that there's life after death, that there's higher purposes than just making material acquisitions. Every religious tradition teaches some form of that, but not all give many details, if any, about the personality of Godhead. So why? Well, because Krishna's explaining here, because people that are bewildered by the materialistic conceptions of life, that they're too covered by material desires, or to whatever extent we're covered. Sometimes we hear these pastimes and we think, could Krishna really do that? Even to a certain extent, Narada Muni, but very different from us, in his ecstatic devotion, he's thinking, how is it possible Krishna's doing all these things? Let me go see. We, in our not so pure state, we may be thinking a little bit more sometimes, can Krishna really do that? Does he really do that? Why would God need to do that? Or why would God want to do that? These are natural questions. And for most of the world, the pastimes of Krishna is described here, they don't understand, or they haven't heard of them, and therefore many people, they conceive of God as being something abstract or impersonal. And that's a natural thing, and in many ways it's a good thing. But sometimes when people say to us, how is it you believe these things? Well, again, it's because this is the graduate study, because we've studied Bhagavad Gita, we've understood about the modes of material nature, we've understood about the nature of material universe and of the time factor, the difference between the body and the soul, the different processes of yoga, the processes of knowledge, understanding the illusion that the conditioned soul is under from the 3 modes of nature. That's the preliminary. And then we enter into the Bhagavatam and all the descriptions given in the Srimad Bhagavatam about the nature of the world, the nature of the atom, even the nature of the universe, the nature of how the soul takes birth in the human form of body, and all the analysis given by so many great acharyas in the Srimad Bhagavatam. But at the same time, these are rare scriptures. Many people in India, they study the Upanishads. There's very little, if any, information given at all about the personality of Godhead. The Sri Upanishad gives some insight. If you read the commentaries of the Vaishnava Acharyas, it's very clear, but others, I read some other interpretation, some translation of a few verses of the Upanishad the other day, and I thought they missed the whole thing. They quoted the middle verses. They skipped the first part that talks about everything's owned and controlled by the Lord. That they didn't put forward. And then they miss the end where the devotees praying, Lord, please remove your effulgence that I can see you. They didn't put that in. They put the middle verses in about nescience and all of that. So not understanding the real importance that's there. And of course in the Western traditions, or more Western traditions, I mean in the Bible it describes that God is a father and it describes He has a kingdom. But it doesn't give very much more information than that. Just He has a kingdom and He's the father. Okay. How many palaces does He have? Well, it's not explained. What is He doing there? Well, that's not explained. We say, well, it's here. You want to know how many palaces and what He's doing there? It's described here in great detail. and similarly, in the Buddhist text, of course, the Buddha Eastern tradition, so-called, they don't describe the pastimes of the Lord at all. He puts that completely aside. Don't even talk about transcendental form or behavior. It's not within their concept. Their focus is on just becoming free from materialistic concepts, and as we know, our acharyas explain, because the Vedas were being so misinterpreted as just being ritualistic and sacrificial, that's all it was about in many people's minds. So Buddha rejected that and got back to the basic principles. But again, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, taught the basics, didn't go much further than that. And again, we have all respect for these traditions, and they provide great opportunities for people to make spiritual advancement. But when we study these pastimes, we should try to keep in mind that they're not stories in the sense of just stories, cute little stories, right? Like, what are those wonderfully famous comic books that they have in India? The whole series you can read about from the Mahabharata, right? You've all grown up with those comic books, right? Yeah. So Vaishnavas, of course, sometimes the translations aren't so good. They don't necessarily have a pure devotee editor, but they do sometimes a pretty good job. So Vaishnavas, when we read a lot of these things, we understand these are coming from Shastra, and sometimes other people, they're nice stories. Better you read these than Mickey Mouse or Superman or something, but don't take too seriously. But as devotees, when we read these pastimes, we actually take these very, very seriously, because we understand, no, Krishna is a person. He has personality. And we understand why is He not revealed in other scriptures of the world, because if we don't approach God, if we don't approach Krishna with the right mentality, then His pastimes are covered. You can't see them. You can't get so close. You can make some progress. You can get closer. You can practice some form of spiritual life. But you can't get too close. Why? Because there's a tendency, we know, again from our Vaishnava philosophy, that we are individual souls. We have a relationship with Krishna, and for some reason or other, we said, Krishna, thank you very much. Nice place you have here. Can I please have one like this for myself? And because He's God, He said, yes, you can. But there's only one condition. It's full of other people like you who also think it's for you. So good luck fighting it out. That's the only disadvantage. Everybody here is thinking the same thing. The world's for me. I'm the controller, I'm the enjoyer, and you're all here for me, in one way or the other. More pious people, they're not thinking quite so aggressively. Very demoniac persons, they're thinking it's about conquering and lording and exploiting and like that. More pious people, they're not so grossly thinking, but still the world is there for me to enjoy and like that. And because that's our mentality, Krishna's given us this world to come to. And He's very kind. He's very, very kind. Just like the other day I was walking through a shopping mall and I was watching one father with maybe a 4-year-old son. And they were playing. There was some like kiosk in the middle of the hallway, and the son and the father is like this big, the son's like this big, and they were playing, the father was kind of playing hide and go seek. He was hiding. And the son was just laughing. The boy would run this way and his father would jump out, and then he'd run that way and he'd jump out, and then he'd hide and he'd run around and around. He couldn't find him. So he was playing with him in that way. So in a similar way, but a different way, when we desire to play without Krishna, He hides. He hides. He's very kind. I know just a ordinary example comes to mind, at least. I'm not an expert at all in Indian history, but being a Western person or modern person, so much history comes from movies, right? So having seen the movie Gandhi, I think of the one scene where he got in a fight with his wife and he said, "Get out." Remember that scene? So she very dutifully goes and sits on the front porch. That's as far as she went. Because it's a traditional marriage. What do you mean get out? There's no getting out. You're in a marriage. It's a lifelong commitment. But she went on the porch. When he calmed down, okay, come on back. So that was the extent. But he said, "I don't want to see you." So she went away. When he wanted to see her, then she came back. So in the same way, we understand, our acharyas teach us, we have individually said to Krishna, "Please go away. Please go away." So he does. He goes away. He hides from us. It's described in the Shastra, he's in every atom. How is it possible? He's in every atom. He's in every heart. He's in so many scriptures. He's in so many holy names throughout the world are known. So many churches and temples and mosques and places to study. In so many ways he's there, but he's hiding. If we want to see him, we see him. He will gradually reveal himself. If we don't want to see him, he's very kind. He disappears. So sometimes people wonder and they accuse Krishna, where is God? The question is, where is my desire to see God and to be with God and to accept my actual relationship, my role with God? If I want to be God, he hides. Even if I want to have some spiritual progress, some spiritual life, but not have God, he's also very kind. He gives me some practice, some philosophy, some sadhana, some scripture that helps me make a little progress, but doesn't talk about him. He still hides there. It's very rare. And again, why? To protect us from bringing again our offensive mentality. I want to be you. And we can see from these descriptions what a wonderful person he is. I took a few highlights from some of the verses for those of you that weren't here the previous days. It's described in the first verse, Narada enters the one palace and Krishna is doing what? He's sitting with his wife. Most wives these days, at least in the Western countries, they wish their husband would stay at home and sit with them for a few minutes. Isn't it? It's too busy. I got to go. I got 2 jobs. I got 3 jobs. The boss is calling. As soon as you walk in the door, the phone rings. Some system broke down. You've got to get on it right now. Isn't it? But Krishna's sitting with his wife. Nice thing, huh? Isn't it? Maybe not all the ladies would think it's nice that their husband stayed at home, but generally, the relationship is a good one. It's nice to have him at home or her at home. It's described in another verse how he's acting in a way to uphold religious principles. And when Narada Muni walks in, Narada Muni is Jiva Tattva. Great soul, but he's Jiva Tattva. He walks in, what does Krishna do? He stands up, he gives him his seat, he washes his feet, and then what does he do? Amazing, if you remember reading the verse. He pours the water on his own head. God takes the water of his devotee and puts it on his head. What kind of person does that? It's described that he, as we know, he's the supreme spiritual authority. And he honors the brahmanas, not caste brahmanas, not that he honors a caste or one social stratum over another, but he honors those persons who are cleansing their hearts and trying to give leadership to society. He honors those people. It's described that his speech, anybody remember the verse a few days ago? His speech is described as what? You remember? How does it say his speech is? No, not here. As sweet as nectar. His speech. I think so many different kind of nectars. We maybe like mango lassis, or you like sweet rice, or whatever. So imagine it described his speech is so sweet, it's like nectar. Just when he talks, like nectar, is described. His speech is there. And when one of the other palaces, he stands up and says to Narada Muni, "What may we do for you?" He's God. universes come from the pores of His expansion. The whole universe is insignificant to Him. Within that universe, billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of jivas. But He says, what can I do for you? He's ready to serve Him. It's described, He's the master of all masters of mystic powers. In India, I think more than many places of the world, there's some attraction to mystic powers, right? Even today, some teachers, right, say, you study me, I'll give you some mystic power. So Krishna is the master of the masters of mystic power. Described that in another place he goes, and Krishna's there with one of his queens and Uddhava, and what are they doing? They're playing dice. He plays. Sometimes the conception is there, okay, God's a person, but He's sitting in a big throne. And on the West, sometimes they have some of the evangelical Christian groups that pass out little flyers, like we distribute so much literature. Sometimes they show a painting, God, a big faceless guy, with little tiny ants of people walking by. And He's going, heaven, hell. Heaven, hell. He's deciding, He's judging who goes where. Not a very attractive idea of God. But here, Bhagavatam explained, he plays with His friends. Another place he went, and Narada Muni saw that he was an affectionate father playing with his children. These days in the world there's a lot of issues about fatherhood and how well men are trained to be strong and also vulnerable or sensitive or caring or dutiful in taking care of their children. But Krishna is perfectly doing that. Other places described He was perfectly performing religious rituals. And for those of us that value the importance of someone protecting us in society, in another place He was practicing with His sword and His shield. So these are just giving little glimpses of what's the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And again, it only comes at the 10th canto. It's after one is meant to have understood the previous cantos and the Bhagavad Gita, etc. So we should think a little bit when we hear these pastimes. We should take a moment and kind of breathe deeply and not just hear these as cute stories. Oh, Narada Muni went to the palace and it had jewels like pearls in the walls. That sounds interesting. Or Krishna was playing with his children. Oh, that's nice. Or he was conversing with Uddhava. Oh, that's nice. But we should try to think a little bit. According to our acharyas, who we study and we follow, and we find great wisdom from them when they talk about ordinary things, in the sense measurable things. They say, you chant this mantra, you feel better. We chant the mantra, we feel better. They say, eat this food, you'll feel better, and you'll see your lust and your selfishness going away. We do that, we feel better. They say, get up in the morning and you'll find some psychological and physical advantage. We do that, we feel better. Tangible things. Avoid these sinful activities or these unclean behaviors, even though the whole world is doing them. Give them up, you'll feel better. We do it, we feel better. It's like, oh, just see it works. And then they say God's a person. And He'll play with you. And He wants to play with you. And He has amazing pastimes, far beyond anything exciting any TV producer or movie maker or novelist ever dreamed of when we read about these amazing pastimes of Krishna. So we should think a little bit, how is it possible that and if we look at our own hearts a little bit, we have to acknowledge, I'm sometimes affected or vulnerable or controlled by anger. Sometimes I feel lusty thoughts, or I feel greed, or sometimes I feel some enmity, some ill will even towards others, even Vaishnavas, even sometimes superiors, father, mother, teachers, like that. I have all of these negative qualities and all of these different obstacles. Sometimes I'm lazy, whatever it may be. We all have our different battles we fight. How is it that Krishna is allowing me to understand His pastimes? How is it possible? We can see there's so many scriptures in the world that don't go that far. It stops. It's like many people, they translate Bhagavad Gita. Some of the most famous modern translations most well known. They only go to like the 6th chapter and they stop, because that's when Krishna starts talking more detailed about himself. They don't talk about that part. We're going to stop here. So as I mentioned before, a lot of scriptures they don't even go that far, but our Bhagavatam it does. So how is that possible? Let's say tomorrow you decided you were really curious to know what the inside of Prime Minister Modi's house looks like. Or I live in Washington, D.C. What if I just drove downtown one day, jumped over the gate, knocked on the door, and said, I'm very curious if Barack sits on the bedstead with Michelle and she fans him. Would I have access to that? You can't even the newspaper, you don't know what's going on. You know, some people, they'll guess, they'll try to make some money selling some book about I know what really goes on behind the palace walls, but nobody does. You can't get in there, you don't get in there, but this is God. It's Krishna. And he's telling us what he does in his house, with his friends and his wife and his children. You don't know what I do in my house with my wife and my friends and my children. That's private. I'm not going to tell you. Who are you? Isn't it? But Krishna doesn't say that. Who are you? I'm envious. That's okay. Who are you? I'm sinful. At least I have been. That's okay. Who are you? I'm a cheater. I'm proud. I'm attached to my money or my body or my beauty or, so many things that we're affected by these things. Krishna said, that's okay. Come and hear a little bit about me. So what is the nature of this person? Again, if you ask, most of us here, if somebody said, can I come and, live at your house for a week and see everything you do? Most of us would say, I don't think so. Thank you, but no thanks. Thanks for inviting yourself into my house, but I don't think so. Most of us. But Krishna's inviting us in. It's amazing. And this is because of the nature of the Supreme Lord, the Lord Krishna, and also it's because of the kindness he manifests when he comes as Lord Chaitanya. When he says, let everyone have an opportunity to hear about me. And by the kindness of our acharyas, because it's interesting, these literatures, they weren't even available until recently. Described Bhaktivedanta Thakur, as far as his interest in studying Chaitanya Charitamrita, he couldn't find the book. It wasn't very easily available. He finally came across a copy, and that really inspired him, and he went on to become the great acharya that we know, but it wasn't available. And previously, I was just reading some scholarly article recently, was talking about, they had some quote from some Vedic literature about, if a less qualified person reads the Shastra, they, pour molten lead in their throat, or, some horrible thing like that. It's there in the Vedas. It's there in the Jewish tradition. If you weren't a certain caste, you couldn't study the Torah. In the Western traditions, I can't remember the man's name, but one of the first people to translate the Bible from Latin into a modern language was killed. They killed him because they no, this is for the priests. This is only for the priests, the common people. If you translate this into English, the common people will read the scripture. That can't happen. Not that that's the mood of the Bible, or certainly not the mood of Jesus, but anyway, that was the misunderstanding. And then similarly, sometimes people think, well, no, nobody's supposed to read the Shastra. You have to be born in a certain group, or you have to have a certain type of education, or this or that. That's not Lord Chaitanya's mood. Lord Chaitanya's mood is he takes it to the street, and he freely distributes, right? That description is given in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that he broke open the storehouse of love of God and distributed it freely. So you see today, Prabhupada's books now, Prabhupada, when he translated into English, because it's more or less it's the most used language in the world, but he didn't stop there. And he said, okay, translate into French, into German, into Russian, into Swahili, and it's going on and on every year. There's more languages. Why? Make it more available. Well, you can't put it in this language. Why? Well, these people are sinful. Who cares? You have to, you must, then even more reason, do it more fast. The more degraded the culture, the more fast you should put the books there. Why? Because it's the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even though we have said, Krishna, please, you go away, you please hide, and he's hiding. But like the father, remember the father in the mall, he's hiding, but then he sticks his head out. I'm here. And the sun goes, where? And then he hides again. Isn't it? So human life is like that. Human life is like that. We may have wanted to hide from Krishna, to have Krishna hide from us, but he's always reminding us. Sometimes he's throwing some nectar, sometimes he's kicking. Isn't it? But the lessons are coming one way or the other. Sometimes we go out on book distribution or Harinam, and you approach someone with some book or something. Oh, no, I don't want that. No, that's about God. Go away. You see, I don't want to hear about God. I want to pursue my materialistic life no matter what. Don't disturb me. So we say, okay, have a nice day. And then we say, Hare Krishna. And it enters their ear. No, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. It's okay. It's okay. Hare Krishna. Have a nice day. I don't want anything to do with God. Go away. No problem. But here, would you like a gulab jamun before you go? Etc. Somehow, because we know, we have faith that by coming in contact with the Lord and His representatives, people become purified. So, I think this, the point I'm trying to make here is that we should understand how fortunate we are when we read these pastimes, to actually learn about the qualities of the Lord, and to understand that God is not just a stone, He's not simply the creator, He's not just some energy, but He's the supreme person, and He's the all-attractive person. Just like we read about here, it's so beautiful, such a Vrindavan mood with Radha, Radha Gopinath here. He's dancing so beautifully. But even when we think about the Ras Leela for a minute, so Krishna is there with the gopis, the topmost devotees of the whole world, the whole universe, the whole existence, and He's dancing, and each one of them is thinking what? What are they thinking? Who's there in their mind? Krishna, who else? Nobody. Just them. Now when they get proud a few minutes before, a few hours before, maybe it was 1,000,000 years in the celestial time, then He disappeared from them too. We have to remember that story too. When they became a little proud, they're thinking, we're the most fortunate women in the world because Krishna, poof, where'd he go? Krishna. And then when through their anxiety they became a little more humble again, then Krishna appeared. And then He's so kind, when He dances with them, God dances with the soul, dances with the soul. I mean, we are so small, but He wants to dance with us. He wants to play with us. He wants to have different types of pastimes with us. We're so small, but He actually wants to be with us. And not only that, to fulfill the desires of His topmost devotees, He created with them the Yoga Maya, that they're the only ones with Him. Well, how is that possible? Because that He was so intimately connected with them, He so much wanted to fulfill their desires in that way. So, Krishna is so kind. We're reading, as Prabhupada says, there's one verse in the Bhagavad Gita, after some particularly attractive explanation of Krishna, Prabhupada says we should be captivated by this information. So we should think like that. I should be captivated. When I hear about, you go out in the world and you see there's so many attractive things, but then we see through those things. We see through those things. I was reading something the other day. There's some movie star in America. She's 30. Listen closely, ladies. She's 30. And she was complaining about how in Hollywood they're biased in favor of younger women, and how hard it is for her to get a job now because she's 30. So what kind of world is that? If you're young and beautiful, but they throw you out at 30, you're over the hill. Who wants to take shelter in that kind of thing? Or whatever. Same thing with men, always looking over the shoulder. Some more powerful person is coming up. Men and women, to push you out of the way. So many things. There's no shelter there. There's no shelter. That's why it's described it's an illusion. But when we hear about Krishna, how He gives shelter to His devotees, then as Prabhupada says, how could we not love such a person? And the problem, of course, is because our heart's a little dirty. We're still having the effects of so much karma, the past. Our minds are somewhat cloudy, a little confused. We sometimes experience lust and greed and anger and all those different things. So we have to become purified. So therefore the bhakti-yoga process is there. But in the course of that process, the Lord is so kind. He appears in the Shastra, He appears in His name, He appears in His acharyas, He appears through His devotees, He appears in the prasadam. In so many ways He's trying to help us. So keeping that in mind, that should captivate us, and that should enthuse us, and that should inspire us. And whatever little obstacles we may sometimes experience, we should always remember they're little obstacles. It's described there's 8,400,000 species of life. We've probably been through all of them, maybe more than once. Who knows? But we have this human form of life. And among so many different types of human species, this planet and others, some get an opportunity to take some spiritual commitment. So we're here. We've got some spiritual knowledge is there. So many different scriptures of the world, all are very beneficial and wonderful. Only a few give knowledge of the Supreme Person. And we're hearing that. Many, many different processes of spiritual life are given, spiritual practice, but the chanting of the Lord's name is the most powerful, the most helpful. We're allowed to do that. Krishna Prasadam is such a powerful way to purify ourselves. You don't even have to be in the right mentality. It helps, but even if you're not, just eat prasadam. In the early days, when Prabhupada came to the West, he would keep a bowl of gulab jamins in his office. So when devotees came to see him, sometimes a little disturbed, he'd give them a gulab jamin. They're happy, he'd give them a gulab jamin. Sometimes they just came to see him to get a gulab jamin. He gave them a gulab jamin. He was so kind. So we're so very, very fortunate. So reading this section here, not much of a purport to comment in, so I thought just look at kind of the bigger context of what does this mean that we're actually able to hear about Krishna's pastimes. And understanding this a little bit, we should try to commit to hearing them more attentively, to try to serving Krishna more attentively, to trying to awaken our love for Krishna, and try to help others learn about Krishna, because that's actually all He asks, is that you please come back to me, and as Lord Chaitanya particularly emphasized, try to share this with others. The same way I'm giving you mercy, you become merciful. The same way I've opened the door for you and looked aside all of your shortcomings and your mistakes of the past and whatever not such nice things may remain in our consciousness, He overlooks those. We should overlook those in other people as well. And in this way we can become instruments in His hands. And I'll end and open up for some questions if there's a little time. Especially this year, today, according to the Vaishnav calendar, is the day Prabhupada landed in the West. So it's a very important day. Now, somehow or other the whole world actually celebrated on the calendar year, but somehow the BBT calendar didn't kind of align itself with the ISKCON 50 plans. But this is a very important day to celebrate both days. It's worthy of being celebrated twice. So this is the day that Prabhupada, under the order of his spiritual master, he prepared for his whole life. And it's such amazing difficulties and obstacles that he overcame to get on the Jaladuta, and 2 heart attacks on the boat, and he had no money, and all he had was his trunks of books, and he landed and had a place to stay just for a few weeks. That's all. Then he went back to New York, and there was no real shelter for him there. And so many difficulties. Typewriter was stolen, so many things. Amazing obstacles and problems that Prabhupada underwent, but yet he tolerated them. And each of us should think, when we stand in front of Prabhupada's Murti in the morning, when we see Prabhupada in the altar, when we chant the morning Mangala prayers, we're praying to the mercy of the spiritual master, we should think Prabhupada came to save me. We should think like that, not in a selfish way. He came for me only, not like that. But in an appreciative way. We should think like that. How he did those sacrifices. He may not have known me, but he knew I was out there. And he came to save me and to save you and to save everybody else. So, with this year being the 50th anniversary of Prabhupada's coming to the West and then back to India to nurture Krishna consciousness here and around the world, we should try to remember and meditate on Prabhupada's contributions and his sacrifices, and remember that each and every one of us, we have a personal and intimate relationship with Prabhupada, each and every one of us, because he is the founder Acharya, and he's the preeminent Siksha, or instructing Guru for each of us in this generation, the next generation, the next generation to come. He will be the one that's always current, always giving guidance through his different representatives and through his books and through his temples and his teachings, etc. So this year being the 50th anniversary of Prabhupada leaving on his world mission, and next year being the 50th anniversary of Prabhupada establishing ISKCON, we should, as individual devotees, as friends, followers, initiates, whatever we may be, disciples, grand disciples of Prabhupada, we should be thinking, what can I do to honor him in this 50th anniversary? And I'm hoping that the Chowpatty Temple, which has been such a leading community in so many ways, I hope that you're all coming together and making serious plans of something very spectacular to glorify Prabhupada, both internally and externally, in terms of nurturing our own Krishna consciousness and making his presence and people more aware of his contributions around the world. I know, like in Washington, D.C., we're planning a big, many things. Of course, all the events, everything you do next year. The Flower Festival needs to be the 50th, ISKCON's 50th anniversary Flower Festival. Rath Yatras, any Rath Yatras, the 50th anniversary, Rath Yatras. 50th anniversary, Janmashtami. 50th anniversary, Gaur Purnima, etc. So that needs to be there. But also some special events. We should think of special things. What can I individually do as a service to our acharyas to celebrate this important event of ISKCON's 50th anniversary? Because it's a big deal. When something's been around for 50 years, it's there to stay. There's a lot of religious communities and organizations and even businesses. They come and they go. They come and they go. They come and they go. When you reach 50 and you're growing and you're expanding as ISKCON is around the world, that's a significant achievement. And it's a time when people they'll ask, you've been around for 50 years as an international organization? Well, maybe I should take you more seriously. Tell me more who you are, what you're doing. People say, well, what was ISKCON 51 years ago? It was 0. Was it today? It's over 600 temples. What was ISKCON before Prabhupada went to the West? How many books? None. Today, 500, our best count, 516 million books and magazines have been distributed. That's a lot. 1,000 chanting parties every week on the streets of the cities of the world, spreading Krishna's name. Conservative estimates, 3 billion plates of prasadam have been distributed by ISKCON and its affiliates around the world. 3,600 Namahata groups, or Bhakti-vriksha, whatever, different varieties in different places, meeting every single week. About 75,000 initiated devotees. So not all Brahmins, but in a sense it kind of compares, because those are people taking vows, right? Our vows are pretty strict vows. So it's almost like trained priests, some of those are committed people. And it's a little difficult to estimate, but we estimate about 10 million people a year worship at ISKCON temples. It's not just visit, but worship. Like, go on Janmashtami night. On the most sacred day of the year, where do you go? There's a lot of people don't go to temple very much, but on Janmashtami they go someplace. Where do they go? If they go to ISKCON, that means that's their primary place of worship. So 10 million worshippers, where 50 years ago there was nothing. So it's a big deal. It's a very big deal. We should celebrate internally. We should try to spread the word and do several things that are very significant, so the world will sit up and take notice of who is this great teacher, Srila Prabhupada, who is this Lord who loves his devotees so wonderfully as Lord Krishna. What are these amazing books that reveal such high truths, yet such simple, clear to understand philosophy? What is this community that's now feeding millions of people every day sanctified food? Who are these people that first and foremost say life is meant for truthfulness, cleanliness, self-discipline, and compassion, mercy. Who teaches those principles? I heard a few people here the other day. You work for Tata. Tata tell you when you walk in the door those 4 things? Pepsi Cola tell you those 4 things? What are the principles of being a Pepsi employee? Well, first you got to be truthful. How about the government? That's a joke. I live in Washington. Is the first principle truthfulness? No. Is it cleanliness? They try. Different governments, they try. We respect government officers for whatever they're doing to help uplift society. But our society is teaching people to be saintly people. It's a wonderful thing. There's others also making contributions. We don't minimize that. But to see what ISKCON has achieved in just 50 years, it's an amazing thing. And we should feel some sense of humility and some sense of pride and a sense of enthusiasm to try to make it grow even more the next 50 years. So please, with this big holiday coming up, please be thinking and transcendentally scheming. How will we let more and more people? How many people in Mumbai? 15 million, something like that? 20 million. And in Maharashtra, how many people? 60, 80 million, something? A lot of people. So not all of them